Hey, everybody, welcome to another Practical Pet Business. Laura and I are going to answer a question we continue to get, even though we've talked about it before. That's why it's important for all of you to be reaching out to us at practicalpetchat@gmail.com, because if there's more questions about something, let us know. Lauren, we're getting a lot of questions about this particular topic of white labeling because it's so much more prevalent these days, so many more opportunities to do that. And there's a lot of reasons to do it. There are almost as many reasons not to do it.
Mhm.
Let's dive a little bit deeper on that opportunity and how you looked at it when you were looking at it in terms of white labeling your name onto these other, companies producing a product.
Yeah, I was white labeling before really it was even a thing for the industry. Like, I'd go to the trade shows and I couldn't even find anybody who would white label. Maybe one over the first few years. Um, but I loved white labeling because, if somebody bought, I mean, let's face it, you buy a chew somewhere, right? A chew
Yep.
looks like every other chew that's out there. But if somebody's gonna come in your store and they're going to gift chews to their neighbor's dog or family members at the holidays or whatever, I wanted my label on that. There were a lot of things that I was able to speak with manufacturers and they would agree to allowing me to put my own label on. Um, and that was great. It was carried through the brand wonderfully. Now it's everywhere. I mean, from grooming products to um, clothing to treats and food, even food. And for me, that was a difficult one for me to agree to. I actually didn't do that, and it was offered to me several times in a few different categories of food, genres of food. Um, my concern was, obvious. Um, what do you do in a recall situation? Then your name is associated with that. So, treats were a little easier to control. You could pick a little better. It wasn't always a staple. There was variety to be had. But food, a lot of people stuck with one food. And I know a lot of people who did white label food. It worked for them. But every time a recall happened with the company that they were white labeling with, I wondered about that. I was like, so how do you deal with it? Do you ignore it because that's not the label you have on your food? That's irresponsible, and I had a lot of questions and concerns about that. So for me, I turned it down. It wasn't something I was comfortable with. But virtually everything else, it's about picking wisely, and being smart about it. There are a few things that it's difficult to white label. You and I talked about white labeling in the past when you were a vendor of mine.
Yep.
And we did talk about it, and I think we even got serious about it to an extent, and then we both backed out at the same time for the same reasons.
Yeah.
And it was like, yeah, I'm thinking that's probably not what I want to do in this particular genre. So, you want to be smart about it. Not everything has to carry your store brand. But it's great if you can have some things. I mean, there's chains out there. There's, nationwide chains out there that I won't mention here that they private label their whole selection of treats. And they
Yep.
carry a very small selection of other labeled treats. And I gotta tell you, if I'm in that store, I go to the other labeled treats because I don't know where they got them from. I don't know whose they are, where they came from, who's the co-packer, where they're sourced, all these
Yep.
questions that I would want to know that I'd want to have, comfort in. On the other hand, we were the kind of store that people highly trusted, but I struggled with that too because it's like, well, if I'm going to put my name on anything and people are trusting that it's my name and I'm not the one making it, that was nerve-wracking. It's a dichotomy. You really have to think through what you're going to do and when. Or, I've seen stores that don't think it through it at all and they white label everything they can. And it works for them.
Yeah, and I mean, I love that you just went through that decision tree for yourself because it's quick to be an easy yes.
Hmm.
Because oh wow, it's an extension. I'm building my brand. I'm build and but but this is worse than buyer's remorse. This is now buyer seller. Oh my god, remorse. Um, because you are putting everything on the line. And that is not hyperbole. That is, nope, you're responsible for this. You put your name on it,
Hmm.
and anything else with your name on it now becomes at risk with the wrong decision. I don't want to be
Right.
overly dramatic, but I love that you called out in the stores. And it's interesting because I think there used to be a big difference in the pricing. And that's why white labeling
Hmm.
had more of an attraction because the big brand that was, the co-packer on the white label was price established and they were not going to come off of those margins. These days, as I'm looking at it and I'm seeing it, and there are some who are white labeling and still trying to get that same margin.
Right.
Uh, and to your point, I'll look and I'll be like, well, good for you if you can do that. Some stores could. I actually believe your store could because you had that kind of credibility. In fact, I think you probably could have charged more than the companies that were co-packing for you and white labeling for you because of your name, your reputation with your customers. It wasn't a price issue. It was, I trust Lorin and Furry Face over anybody. That is when I think white labeling is most effective because it's
Hmm.
not about a price thing, it's about a quality thing. And I also think as I'm looking at these things, it's not. I wish we all had the wherewithal to be like, well, I want to know, where this is, co-packed and this and that. But as we've talked about in other, there's so much more that
Hmm.
goes into these processes. And so even if I know who's co-packing, I don't know. We've talked about food grade. We've talked about, oh, it's got this labeling, that labeling, all the rest of it. What does that really mean? It's not just, I'm going to put my logo on it and now I'm extending my brand. It's, or at least it should be. Now I'm going to become deeply knowledgeable in that space. And if I'm going to put in all that work, is this the right product to do that for?
Right.
And that is something you and I had conversations wide ranging on many different things, even things that were not things that we were considering white labeling. Hey, this is what we have this opportunity to do. We would like to bring this together with that, and we think it makes it unique. And the feedback from you and others was it does, but Rob, I'm not sure that that's the right play because
Hmm.
X, Y, and Z. And
Right.
that's that analysis. I love that folks want to grow, want to build. I love that. I encourage that. And where you can, absolutely. But the one other part of that is the more successful you are and the more you're needing their co-packing time and ingredients and all the rest of that, you don't control the pricing. You don't control the sourcing. You don't control. The one thing you do control is your name, your reputation. And that's about it in that process. And so just knowing that, is it worth that? How
Well,
much
look
are
at
you cannibalizing from your current
cannibalizing.
space?
Exactly.
Yeah. So
Well, and if you look at, I mean, you could even extend this to pet foods that you carry, right?
yep.
Most pet foods, don't have their own production facility, so they go to a co-packer. So isn't that essentially what they're doing? They're white labeling with that co-packer. Now it may be their recipe, maybe once in a while they have somebody there, obviously not your higher end brands or your better brands who say they have somebody there all the time.
Right.
But essentially that's white labeling. They're trusting someone else to use the right ingredients, source the ingredients correctly, all of those kinds of things too. And then they're putting their brand on it. So same thing happens. I know a couple of pet foods that I know companies created their brand white labeling off of a brand
Yeah.
using a co-packer. And it became an established brand. So here it got passed what from the co-packer to the main brand, who then allowed white labeling off of their brand. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is convoluted. And it actually made me not carry that
Yeah.
last brand because I was like, this is too many variables in here, too many
Yeah.
potential issues, too many problems that can come along. If I'm going to do that, I might as well carry the original brand, and just let that sit that way. People can decide with that. It's convoluted. It happens so much more than people realize. We're talking about it at a retail level, with retailers white labeling, but really it happens at the manufacturer level a lot.
Well, 100%, 100%. And I think that's the enticement as well, right?
Mhm.
Is you're seeing others do it successfully, but here's the difference. They're doing it on scale, not on profit margin.
Right.
And that's where I see a lot of the stores miss that ingredient into it, where they're going, well, I can, and my question really has gotten, so here's, free consulting for everybody. How much are you really going to pull in profit margin wise? And what kills me is people will go, well, I'm selling X amount, so I'm going to sell. Okay, so you just cannibalized one product for your product.
Right.
Now, what's your profit margin minus what's the time spent that you're going to have to spend to know, manage, coordinate, answer? When you do that equation, a lot of times, if you're a single or maybe a smaller multi-unit store, it's not, it doesn't always add up. I'll just say that. Um, there are some products though that I'm like you 100%. Like if you have that opportunity, absolutely. I
Yeah.
love that. Um,
Well,
I do think the consumables is, and I think, hopefully the folks are kind of picking up where we really want to throw that cautionary tale is on consumables. It's so tempting because you see it on a regular
right.
basis and you feel like, oh, I can do this, I can elevate it. Yes, for some of you, yeah, you certainly could. For others, though, your best pathway is by cannibalizing. And in
Mhm.
that cannibalization, you're also taking on all of that additional time, risk, expenditure of resources. And could you get to where you want to going in different directions? And I
Well,
quite,
and while you're making a name for yourself, exposing your logo and your brand further and further out, is your margin smaller and smaller because
yeah,
there's costs involved, right? With the labeling and the packaging and that sort of thing. So it doesn't make sense for me. It really didn't make sense to do it on a food
yeah,
because there's such a low profit margin anyway in food. And it was like, well, that doesn't add to my interest at all of wanting to
right,
do that. I don't need to make a smaller margin. And but it brought up something that was when I first started really looking into how many brands white label off of other brands. There was a really well-known flea and tick line, really grew into something big. And it was a firestorm of popularity.
yeah,
And they grew and grew and grew, and something happened. I was super annoyed. And I happened to go to who I thought was their competitor. And I'm at a trade show talking to the competitor, and I'm ranting about the situation. And there's not a lot of talking going on. There's a lot of exchanged looks between the people in the booth and everything. And I'm like, all right, what am I missing? And the guy who was in charge pulls me over and he goes, they buy that product from us. They white label it. I'm like, what? They're like, yeah. I'm like, are you kidding me? No. Okay, so you're a well-known name too. Why don't I just cut through all that crap and stop venting about it? And I'll just turn everything over to this. Even doing that, because that other brand had made such a name for itself, it was difficult to get people mentally off of that and into what I call the original product, even though I told them this is where that company got their product from.
Right.
And they were like, but it doesn't have their name on it. It's the same product. It just doesn't have their name on it. Right. Do you have that? Do you carry that? No, I'm not carrying that any longer for whatever reason, which
Right.
doesn't need to be discussed
I
here.
and I'm just wondering because I've had similar experience with all of the, ability to educate and get the information out. Will we have those same experiences today? What I take away from it is that and you and I have harped on this, and folks, hopefully we're not boring you with this, but this is why we harp on it. You've got to know where the products are made, who's making them, for so many different reasons, whether it's white labeling, whether it's this brand just frustrates the heck out of me, or I'm getting a lot of questions about this. That has become so much more important, but so much more available as well. And I just think it's a part of not just this discussion, but you've got to be a part of your
Here,
entire business plan these days.
here's the problem, though. You know me. I asked all those questions. I mean, I dig, 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 dig. I talked to
Yeah,
owners of that last company, and what they said turned out to not be true
yeah.
because they
Well,
concocted an
that's such
entire
a great
story to go with
right.
it. So
That's such a great point too. Everybody is, yeah, yeah. You have to. I mean, how many times do
it's
you and I
tough.
share
Yeah.
stories of reps that walk in, make this claim, and you're just like, am I going to educate them, or am I just going to let them keep saying
Yeah,
that? Because
exactly.
it's just not worth my time and effort to train somebody else's, staff and what they're pitching and saying. Um, I love that. I think this is such a great topic, and I think the reason you and I continue to get this question is because it is more and more acceptable as well. I like that you brought up earlier that wasn't something that was a lot of manufacturers wanted to do. They wanted to just focus on building the brand. Now you have so many of them not only being open, but actually starting side divisions to make
Hmm.
something very similar. And I think that's the other thing I just want to call out is something very similar is different. And there are times where I'll hear from people, oh, we have it made there. And that means nothing to me. I'm like you. That's fine. How is yours different than theirs? Have you seen their recipe versus, yours? Because I will say this as someone that was approached quite a bit with different entities, we were never giving away our exact
Sure.
proprietary formulations. It makes no sense. Okay. But this is what is in it. And if you want to come up with your own formulation, it's something we can consider. That's that other part of this that I want to make sure. Just because it's done at so and so place where so and so does it does not mean you have a product that is exactly the same. And that's one thing going back to, all of our CBD discussions on all the rest of that. It's like it's not the same. The product is different, the process is different, the formulation is different. That's why, as you're considering white labeling, yes, it's more available, it's easier out there to do it than ever before, but you really do have to understand so much more and ask yourself that question. Is this what you're going to prioritize for your business? because at least at the beginning part of that process, it's got to be your top priority. And I'm not being hyperbolic on this. It has to be. And the reason is you're risking everything else that you've built
Right.
the minute you put your name to it. And so I can't stress that enough to everybody. But last thoughts from you, Lorin, and then we'll send everybody back to their businesses.
I'm with you. You spend all that time building your name just to turn around and ruin it because what you envision isn't what happens, and that's so easily the case if you have no control, and you have no control in white label for the most part. There are exceptions to that. But
Sure.
even if you reach out to, I considered having a grooming line with a company I loved. And they were like, yeah, we'll do that. We'll do white label. They hadn't done it, but they would do it for me.
Yeah.
And just the more that we dug into it, the more we started looking at it, I was like, why am I doing this? This just doesn't even make sense. I can't control it. I won't know if anything changes or they do anything different. And it's like, do I really want to do that? I have nothing except my name on it. Everything I built, I'm gonna just take a crapshoot on and see what happens. And I decided it wasn't worth the risk. Other things, again, you have to do that with everything you're thinking about. It was worth it, but they
Yeah.
were minor things that had big impact.
Yeah.
But and if you're a chain like the chain that I was referencing earlier, you got 100 and some stores, 200 stores.
Absolutely.
That's different.
That's a different discussion. No, I love that. And I think that's the ending spot here for us on this episode, folks. We're not against it. We just really want you to be aware. We have seen a lot of uh, companies be successful doing this in a synergistic way, and that's the key. It's got to be a win-win-win, meaning a win for the co-packer, a win for you, and a win for your customers. And when that equation lines up for you, perfect. That's help and cheer you on. But if there's questions within that, you got to work through those. And I know
First,
we got to get there. We want to get there. We got to get this out. We're going to do this. Take a beat, take a breath, as Lorin says, and really, focus in on what is the potential impact, good, bad, indifferent, and is it worth that expenditure and prioritization? So thanks for joining us here on Practical Pet Business. Lorin, as always, thank you. Great conversation.
thanks, guys.
The content of this podcast is for informational purposes only. It is not intended as, nor should it be construed as, professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment for your pets. Always seek the advice of a qualified veterinarian with any questions you may have regarding your pet's health or medical condition. Never disregard professional veterinary advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. The hosts and the guests of this podcast are not liable for any actions taken based on the information shared during these episodes. Any reliance on the information provided is solely at your own risk. Copyright 2025 Practical Pet Chat, all rights reserved. Unauthorized duplication, distribution, or reproduction of any content from this podcast, including but not limited to audio, scripts, and show notes, is prohibited without prior written consent. The opinions and views expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Practical Pet Chat.